Hi, I'm Lars.
And I'm Kim. And we're going to just show you how my husband made this garden trellis for me. I wanted him to build me something that I could have my vines go up on for like my cucumbers and tomatoes and pumpkins. So I'm just going to let him tell you about the process of what he did to make this out of some wood that he had and then some scrap wood.
So basically, I started out on this trellis here with 3 pieces of 12-foot cedar, and they're called 1x2, so it's 1.5 inch, 3/4 inch by 1.5. And those are called 1x2s. So you'll see here, this is when I'm assembling, sort of toward the end of it, and I pre-cut the pieces so they're a little over 5 feet each. Those are the things going up and down, and the little pieces going across are around like 31 inches. Just kind of something to have the pieces stick out so that you can tie your strings and your ropes and whatever, kind of like a little ladder with things sticking out instead of like a box. So
He's just drilling in these, he uses stainless steel screws so that they won't rust out in the garden. And then he used some wing nuts on the main supports so that they could go in and out. And you'll see I have a video picture here of him closing it and opening it so that you can make it as wide as you want or as narrow. And also you can just close it up so that you could store it for the winter. But I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about what he's doing here.
So basically, what I'm making is like a little tent that that will angle up. It looks like a little tent, and the hardware is just I'm using what some screws that I really like, and they're called fast tap. They're hard to find. Mr. Plywood is one of the only sources of it, and I really like it because it doesn't. It has a what we call a pre-drilled tip. So generally, when you drill into wood, when the normal screw, it'll crack the wood, and then you have to pre-drill. Well, with fast tap, you generally don't unless you're working with hardwood. Well, this is cedar, which is really soft, so I don't really have to use that. But I like the screws because I'm so used to it, and I think they're very durable, and they are also they're very durable. So here's the almost finished product. At this point here, those 3 12-foot pieces of the 1x2 wasn't quite enough, so I had to cut some more out of some 1x6s and sort of improvise a little bit. But so basically what I'm doing is I set up, I put them together with the stainless steel bolts, and so that way you don't have to worry about, and when it rains and stuff, it's not going to make it, the rust spots are not going to go down the wood or anything, and they'll never rust. And it can also, like Kim said, you can collapse it together, and you'll see at the end where I'll collapse them together so they're really easy to store in the shed or outside or somewhere, or just leave it out for the winter or after the growing season. So here I am, like I said, with the screws, and I've got a cordless. It's really easy to work with cedar because it's really soft, as opposed to, and it's the best kind of wood for any kind of outside structure because cedar is very good at resisting rot. If you were just to take fir, for example, which is fairly inexpensive, and put that outside, after probably a year or so, it starts to crack and warp and do all kinds of weird things. But cedar lasts a long time, even under our northwest rainy weather. So here I am marking, just trying to make it so one side will match another side, and you'll see now I'm putting in the side, I don't know what you call them, sidebars, which will support any kind of thing you want to hang, like Kim was saying, tomatoes, cucumbers, squash.
And what he was just doing is measuring 7 inches down to put the piece of wood that goes across and have it consistent with the other side. So he marked it at 7 inches, and then he's just drilling it in. And it's nice that he has this cordless drill, so he doesn't need to be near any electrical outlets as he's doing it. And you can see him just doing it here in the backyard next to his little shop. So he gets that stringer in. I guess you'd call it a stringer because it goes from one side to the other, and it looks just like a tent. And then he measures down, I believe, about 24 inches. And this is just a thing he threw together on his own, so there's no pattern. And he goes down like a couple feet and is screwing it in. I'll let him tell you a little more.
So you can make this thing any size you want. I just thought, well, my pieces are actually, the way I worked it out, a 12-foot piece, if you take, it turns out to be 57 inches. If you take two that are 57 inches for the things that go up and down, then you end up with a piece that's a little over 2 feet wide, or 30 inches. And that's kind of what I wanted. So it's about 30 inches sideways and 57 inches tall. But you can round it up. You can have it 4 feet tall. You can have it 1 foot wide, but that's almost 5 feet and almost 3 feet wide. So now here I'm saying that I'm realizing that I don't have the pieces that I want all nice and cut up already. So then I took, if you have extra, sometimes when you run out of something exactly that you need, instead of waiting to go to the hardware store or the lumber store, you cut up what you have. And I had some wider boards because we just got done doing some repairs on our fence. So I always try to kind of keep random pieces of wood around, so it seems like I always end up using them for something, and in this case I very much did. Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to complete the project.
And what he did is he cut the wider board, he calls it ripping it, which is just sawing up the middle of it to create this other piece to go down the center. And we didn't have that on film, but that's what he did. He just cut it in half so that he'd have a piece that matched the other side pieces too, and it would all look consistent and symmetrical. And then he's just screwing it in. We wanted something to tie more of the vines onto. So you can watch him here just making it more.
And I'm not taking a lot of. I'm trying to roughly make it consistent on both sides, and I'm not worrying about if it's off by a little bit, but just try to use the same measurements. And here, this is right where like, uh-oh, I'm missing a piece. And I was telling Kim, okay, well, I think if we put one in the middle, it gives a little more structure, because you can imagine, it doesn't look very flimsy right now, but if you're putting on hanging things off it, you really want it to be strong. And here I'm showing how you fold it together. If you do it sort of correctly, then you can store it. It only takes up 1.5 inches on the wall. You could put a bunch of these stacked together, and then you put it then reuse them, or just leave them out in the garden.
That's the good thing about the wing nuts, is that it can open and close, collapse, and not just have a screw, because if you have a screw in there, it's going to be stationary. But
and once you put your, as we were planning to do, hang things off there, and it could be, you can do very light things like peas, beans, anything kind of that wanders up a pole, or hang tomatoes.
Or pumpkins. What I do is I put them inside an old pantyhose, and I tie the pantyhose right onto the supports, and they can hang up off the ground, and that way they won't get rotten from the moisture of the ground. So that's why I wanted some more trellises. At the end I'll have maybe some pictures of my garden, and you can see I have different trellises and poles that Lars has built for me.
And this is also a space saver, because when you're a garden, a lot of people don't have a lot of room, a lot of extra room to have a garden, and if you hang some, and if you grow some of these things off the ground, then you have other things that have to be on the ground that you can that you can grow.
So I call it growing up rather than growing out. And we live on a city lot in Portland, Oregon. And so we don't have a lot of space, but we can garden and get quite a bit of produce just by growing up.
Oh, and here's I'm putting in some screws, and I realized I put it in the wrong spot. And this is easy to fix. You just put the screw in where it needs to be and pull out the other one. So a lot of this stuff is just kind of very rustic, and it's not a perfect science, and it doesn't have to look like something that you bought right out of a store, because it's your own. And if you don't want to use little 1x2s, you could use 2x4s if you wanted. That might be, maybe you're planning for it to last a long time. It would still be cedar that you should use, because any other wood, or even hardwoods like oak and so forth, they really don't do that well outside, because and then they stain and they warp and they crack. You want something like this. A fantastic product kind of wood is teak, but it's very expensive, and I wouldn't spend money on teak on something like that, but it would last a long time because it's very durable and it's super hard, and it will never rot. Well, it will eventually. All wood will rot, but it's years and years and years of use.
So you can see here that he put on that piece that he ripped, which means he cut it in half, and it's a little longer, so he's just going to trim it up here so that it matches all the other pieces. And that's just because he hadn't pre-cut it. If he'd pre-cut them, they would have matched exactly. So he's pretty much done here. He's just showing that he's got it almost done. And then we went out in the front yard right here, and he's just finishing it up, because we were going to put it right directly into the garden. And so you can see he's got 4 stringers going across and 3 tent-shaped up and down things that are tied together with the wing nuts.
And keep in mind, this cedar doesn't need to be painted. You certainly don't want to stain it. We don't like to have any kind of chemicals in our garden, so the raised beds that we have are just wood, and we don't want to use pressure treated wood or anything, because that's not good for plants. But so just leaving the wood bare like this, when the sun does come out, and when this go after a summer, it will most likely bleach a little bit. The beautiful nice sort of red color goes just like anything. It's like the houses at the beach. If they're not painted, they're gonna kind of turn kind of gray, and that's fine. The wood is still in great shape, so not worrying about covering it with anything. Just let the rain and the sunshine do whatever, and it looks kind of cool when it ages anyway. So
here it is, finished.
Yeah.
And it's going into the garden, and it's really a beautiful little project that Lars did for me. And I just wanted to say thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You learned something from it.